those wires should now, once I flip the trip on obviously, feed power to the shack. We're going to start getting cabinets and storage and get stuff into the shack. Dare I say it, I believe that is all the organisational stuff and the woodwork building stuff done in the shack. Alright, today is Creative Gardens delivery day, which is kind of exciting because that means we're getting towards the end of it. So we went for a few different things, mainly obviously this here is one of the biggest issues in the garden. So we have a ton of plants coming to try and sort this out. So we're going to get rid of a lot of this and we're going to go kind of grasses, architectural plants, just to fill it out. They're nice and hardy, they'll withstand any wind that howls up here. Hopefully the shack's kind of acting as a bit of a windbreaker anyway. So, but more importantly, so our garden in our previous house was, it had the shack in it and we obviously had our set of furniture, but it wasn't really somewhere where you could come out and lounge and sit about, and if you had a lot of people over there wasn't enough seating. So we decided to get a L-shaped corner sofa. They have a really good selection of like high quality sofas. My wife had looked at a few from different kind of big box stores and I was reluctant to buy them because I know they're not the same quality. Whilst they might be a little bit cheaper, they're cheaper for a reason, and because I work for Creative Gardens I know what to look out for in cheap furniture and furniture that is going to last. So I wanted to get something decent, so we've gone with an L-shaped sofa with a rising table. Firstly because we'll mostly use it probably as a kind of coffee sit-down setup, so the table drops down to coffee table height. It will probably stay in that formation most of the time. But then if we have family over and we need a bit of extra seating, our cube set will hold easily 8 people around it. And then we can rise this table up for the L-shaped sofa, and that's really hard to say. Use it as another dining area for extra people. So again, party coming, that's going to be very handy. I also said then I wanted to address the heating issue in the shack. So in the winter it can get quite cold, and like I say, it's quite windy here as well. So I wanted some way of having heating in the shack, but also then having a kind of fire pit area or something that we can have over by the sofas if we're sitting out on a sort of summer's night and we want to have a fire going. So I went for one of the RB73 Karuba stoves. So it's a 3-sided, well it's 4-sided but 3 sides are glass, sort of outdoor wood burning stove basically. I went for the one on the mobile platform because it'll pretty much sit roughly where I'm sitting right now, and then during the winter when I'm cooking it can push towards the shack and it will sit pretty close to the shack. It won't go in the shack because of the height of it, but it'll get pretty close to the shack and it'll throw off a good heat into it. Now they throw off heat up to a couple of 3 meters around them, like once you get a good fire going in them they're pretty good. That'll push over that direction, keep me nice and warm in the winter, and then if we want to use it at the sofa set it can push this direction. Hopefully the slope of the garden it never pushes that direction because we'll be in trouble if it goes full steam into the house. So now we wait. It is 20 to 9 in the morning. I think the Creative Gardens guys are going to be here roughly around 9:30. Then I'll give them a hand offloading everything. Usually they do it all, but I would kind of feel a bit bad just standing there and letting him offload the whole van on his own. Then we'll get everything off into the drive. Not everything's coming up here straight away, so I'll just dump it all in the drive and then I'll figure out what's going into the garage and what's going up the steps in here. more carrying stuff up steps. Then the number one aim is probably to get this here done. At this stage, our shack's pretty much ready for painting. Our raised beds are in. There's stuff coming from Creative Gardens to actually fill them, like compost, topsoil and stuff. Stones can go down, but this here is probably the dirtiest kind of work. So we're going to dig every plant out, relocate them to new homes. Not here. Our parents are taking quite a lot of them. Then we'll lay out all our new plants, see what we're happy with, and then get them put in the ground. And then because our dogs love nothing more than jumping up here, running up, and then coming full steam from the top of the bank down, and they just scatter bark everywhere across the ground. We're going to actually fence this off. I'll say fence it off. We're going to put little sort of foot-high trellis across the top of it. It's a bit much for the dogs to jump up, and hopefully it'll train them not to. But more than likely they'll just jump on top of the sofa and then across into it, and then they'll know how to get back down again. But that needs done as well. But there's no point doing any of that until it's all finished. Now we wait. Right, that's Creative Gardens in. Plants are all sitting ready to go in, but first we need to get these plants out. Hopefully we will have a nice clear bank before too long. It's full of all sorts, weeds, there's half dead plants in there, there's the occasional dog toy. There's also a section up in the far corner where our newest pup, he likes to chew stones, so he has amassed himself a nice collection of stones up there. Unfortunately that is going to go as well, and that's part of the reason why we want to block it off. So it's kind of grindy work, but we're going to condense it all down to a montage of us getting the bank dug out and getting everything put in place. So the next time we talk, hopefully it'll be finished and we can move on with getting the rest of the garden set up. Oh, I'm a broken man. I wish I could say that was a lovely day's gardening, but that was a slog. I normally enjoy planting, but see, standing on that bank all day long, and then we laid out all our plants in the pots, and every time you kicked one, it rolled down the hill, taking everything else with it. Hopefully, you can't really see it behind me, but I think it's made a massive difference to this whole garden. The kind of before and after shots of this here will probably be the biggest difference, and then once stuff actually starts to grow up and mature a little bit, stuff never looks quite as good when it's just planted, because you have to sort of leave a bit of space between it for it to grow to its eventual size. But I think it's going to make a nice backdrop for the videos, definitely. But I'm almost done for the day. Still a little bit to do along the front here, but I need to put some posts in to hold the trellis we're doing. So I'm going to try and get this done. Dinner is ordered. I think it's going to be here in about an hour's time. I'm ready for it. I'm starving. Despite what looks like a bit of a mess, I think we are pretty close to being finished. So I think we'll just skip ahead, quick montage of everything being done, and I'll see you for the big reveal. That has been a long month, but I'm so happy to say it's finally done. Whilst it was an absolute grind getting it done, I kind of enjoy the process of it. You see, whenever I start this out, I have an idea in my head, and this is why I don't like hiring anybody to do stuff, because the idea in my head changes as I go along. As I was building the shack, there's a few things I kind of decided to leave out or decided to add in, and if there was a contractor doing that, they would hate me for it if I kept changing the plans. Plus, it's true what they say, that no contractor will ever care as much about the job as you will, because it's your own garden and your own shack, so you can put your heart and soul into it. You can take a little bit of extra time that they might not take, although if they're a good tradesman they should. But needless to say, it has made such a massive difference to this garden. It is now a space that we actually want to use, want to come out and sit here. Even if I'm having a cup of coffee, I find myself coming out and just sitting in the shack, just all happy in my little happy place. Which might sound weird to you, those of you that don't have a shack, but those that do will know that you spend a lot of time in it. So this is obviously the biggest addition to the garden. So it is a basic timber structure. It is sheeted with OSB, and then we've painted that over. I kind of like the texture of painted OSB. I like the look of raw OSB too, but whenever it's painted in, sometimes when it's not painted it can get a little bit messy, but I like all painted in and then just highlights of raw OSB as well. It's a nice material to work with. I honestly would say, if you're thinking about it, it is much cheaper than what plywood would be. To me, it has a bit more character than plywood. Plywood might last a little bit longer, but OSB for me is the perfect choice. So all walls, cupboards, frame, everything is all painted the one colour, and that is off black. I think that's a Farwin ball colour. Then for the countertops and the shelves and the pegboard, I know I said I was going to paint the pegboard, but I decided to leave it. Everything is just oiled down. I've just sanded these down and then oiled over the top of them with about 3 to 4 coats of it, with a light sanding in between each. With OSB, I find it's a good idea to sand it because OSB is made by gluing chips together, so to get down into the actual wood and get the oil into it, I think it's better to sand it. The reason why I like leaving them raw is from past experience, they get covered in drips of grease and oil from food, so it's nice to be able to run the sander over them again and then freshen them up. So as far as storage goes, then we have the units behind me. So there's 2 large cupboard units. One of them I've left mostly empty. There's a small shelf at the top of it, but that is for charcoal storage, so I can keep a couple of bags in there at a time to sort of keep me going. I have the garage as well if I want to keep extra stock of charcoal, but up here I'll keep a couple up at a time. The second cupboard is mostly shelved just to store random cooking accessories. They're not filled up at the minute, but I don't want to cram everything in there until I realise what I actually use the most, and then I can keep it up here. And then the drawers are for wood chunks at the bottom, and then I can keep my thermometers and things like that I always need to hand, but they don't necessarily need to be sitting out on display. Above the main worktop area then we have a floating shelf. That is mostly decorative, but I think over time we'll end up filling it up with our oils and rubs and stuff that we tend to use the most. I'll be interested to see how much the polycarbonate roof cuts out sunlight. So in the previous shack it was a clear polycarbonate roof, and I found that keeping rubs and stuff out in glass jars, they tended to kind of bleach down in the sun and all the colour came out of them. So I'll be interested to see if the opal roof, the sort of opaque roof, is opaque the right word? I've no idea, I can never remember which way around it is. If that cuts out a lot of the light and whether it stops those rubs from fading, so we'll maybe put a few test ones out and see how they go. Underneath that floating shelf, and that provides light for the worktop, so it's just an LED strip run the full length of that shelf. And then I obviously have my thermopen mounted in its holder, 2-hand right beside where the main barbecue is, which is my Kamado Joe. So I can't remember whether I said this before, but I never actually measured to see if that gap would fit a Kamado Joe. I kind of just eyeballed it, but I never once rolled it over into place. I don't know why. It would have took 5 minutes to bring it across and then put it back out again. But I just trusted there was always stuff in that corner, and I kind of eyeballed it, thought it was enough, but it fits perfectly, which I was so glad the first time I rolled it over. Then on the wall beside the Kamado Joe is most of our hanging storage. So the pegboard again is just made from 18mm OSB. With 15mm holes drilled in it, and then just dowel rods pushed into it. They can be changed about based on whatever configuration you need. I made a little shelf for it. There's nothing sitting on it at the minute, but if I'm running the barbecue with a thermometer on it, I can always set the unit up onto that as well, because I don't have the side shelves of the barbecue, and that keeps the worktop clear. Below that then we have rails. I never did find the original cast iron rails from the old shack, so me and my wife have decided we probably left it in our old house, but these worked out perfect. there's enough room on there to hold most of the cast iron I use day to day, and then anything else can just be kept in the cupboards. So I've kind of laid everything out the way I think I need it. Nothing is set in stone and nothing is filled up yet either. So if I decide that that's not the right place for cast iron, I'll move it. I've kind of left enough space in the cupboards and on all the worktops that if I realise something else might work a little bit better, or I need something else to hand over something else, I can move it all about. So this is definitely not the final iteration of the shack. The eagle-eyed viewers might recognise this cart at the front. This is the original cart from the original shack. I brought it with me. However, I have covered it. I've painted it in to match the colour of the shack, and I've recovered the top of it, so the old scaffolding boards are still underneath here to give it a bit of rigidity, but I've covered it with OSB just to match everything else. This most likely won't be staying. This is temporary. I do want to do something else out the front of the shack, but I just haven't decided yet. I'm kind of thinking possibly sort of higher bar height worktop that I can get a couple of stools and push them underneath. Means if I'm sitting out here having my coffee, I have somewhere nice to sit. This does the job, but it'd be nicer to have sort of better stools and a better level area. You might notice in videos this cart tends to follow the fall of the ground, which slopes off to the left hand side, so it's not ideal, but I didn't want to rush in and do something that I wasn't overly happy with. I want to think it out a little bit more and use the shack to see what kind of space I can afford to give up to a bar area. So as I mentioned, the roof, we went with polycarbonate again. It was a big debate with me whether to go polycarbonate or whether to do like a standard timber felt roof. But I felt timber and felt would darken it down a lot, and I do videos, I knew I intended on using this dark colour as well. So between the dark colour and a dark roof, I'm not sure it would have looked right. So that kind of does it for the shack itself. It is the most important part of the build, but like I said, the whole point was the garden was usable, but we didn't want to use it. We didn't enjoy being out here at all. It was so plain. The bank looked terrible, aka slimish. We did have our set of furniture, but the grass was such a mess. Every time the dogs came out, they just covered the paving in muck. They carried muck into the house. So it was time for it to change and go. So that's why I asked Creative Gardens to come on board with this, because it's not about just building the shack, it's about turning the whole garden into somewhere that the whole family wants to use. So now once we make food in the shack, we have somewhere to sit and eat it. The shack's also big enough that we can pull chairs over into it if we want to sort of sit out around the fire. And that brings me on to the first sort of aspect, and that is the heating element. So I said in my first video bag that I really wanted to take care of heating in the shack for the winter, but I wasn't entirely sure what way that was going to work. I didn't particularly want heat lamps. With the polycarbonate roof, there is workarounds to get it to work, but I didn't want that orange glow off them either, because the plan is to have this on while I'm shooting videos, and that orange glow would just be a nightmare to white balance. Anybody who doesn't shoot videos doesn't know a clue what I just said, but it was a no-no. So that kind of left some live fire aspect of it. So in Creative Gardens we sell the RB73 range of stoves. I've wanted one for a long time, and I kind of thought this is the opportunity to put one in that's going to do the job. So I went with the Caruba XL. It's a 3-sided glass stove. It's just a wood burning stove. There's just fire bricks in the bottom, 3 sides of glass, and a massive 3-meter tall chimney. So it's good in the way that it gets the sort of smoke where the fire's getting lit up and away from everybody, so it's not blown down into the garden. We've had it lit a couple of times just to test it out, and it works at a treat. The other thing is then it's a mobile one, so it's on wheels. So I bought the mobile platform for the bottom of it so that I can push it closer to the shack in the winter whenever I want heating over here. But if I want heating over at the seating area, I can also push it that direction as well. Now, eagle-eye viewers have probably spotted the festoon lights and thought, hold on, if it's a 3-meter high chimney, how are you supposed to push that around the garden? But the stove is kind of wedged between 2 runs of the lights, so it has more than enough room to come towards the shack or towards the seating area. The other thing is, I can always lift the top part of the chimney off and move it to a different part of the garden if I really want to. But whenever that thing is going, even if it's sitting 2 meters out from the front of the shack where it sits all the time, you can still feel the heat of it in the shack. It seems to throw heat in, and then it kind of builds up underneath the roof of the shack. What that'll be like in the winter, I'm not sure. Maybe it will need to come closer, but I am so happy with it. It works a treat. I'm glad that I can feel the heat off it from far away. Smaller fire pits, you need to be pressed right up against them for them to actually work. But this is a solid lump of steel, and once that thing heats up, it radiates so much heat. Then for the seating area, we went for the Nova Ciara corner sofa set. It has a rising table in it, which is kind of a feature we wanted because, like I said, we have it at a separate dining table, and most of the time, if we're eating outside, we'll probably eat at the dining table. But the sofa set, we want it for more lounging, coffee. After we've ate, we can kind of sit over at it. So the table will mostly be down in the sort of coffee table height. The kids love it. They've been out on it a couple of times already. Even whenever I was kind of finishing up work in the shack, it could have been 10:30, 11 at night, and they decided they wanted to come out and do school revision. That's the kind of effect that sofa set obviously has on your kids. So with the festoon lights turned on, they like curling up. They bring out their blankets and stuff if it's a bit chilly at night, and they'll curl up on it. So I'm kind of looking forward to it now that it's all finished and done with. We can kind of relax on it and put the thing to good use. So another huge challenge we faced then was we were obviously removing all greenery from the garden. This whole side of the garden was grass, and that kind of broke up from the hard paving. But whenever we got rid of it all, I wanted to be very careful that it didn't just turn into a concrete jungle. So that's why we put the raised beds in. We do have them planted out with a few different sort of herbs and veg and fruits. The girls wanted raspberries and gooseberries and all the rest of it. So I had to be careful and remind them that there are 4 raised planters and not an entire allotment. But we have space in there to grow a few different salads and stuff, which will obviously get pulled into the shack for cooking. Herbs I will use all the time, and then the rest of it is just to kind of add a little bit of life to the garden. The stones break up the paving a little bit as well, but then we put planters around the place too, just with different plants and a bit of colour in them, because I didn't want it to turn into just complete concrete. I think plants bring a garden to life. I know it sounds maybe a little bit silly to say, but if you don't have any kind of greenery in your garden, it can look very sterile and boring, so it kind of softens up any hard edges as well. Then Slimish is obviously one of the biggest changes in the garden. It was an absolute mess before. We hated it, and it was the one compromise. When we moved into this house, we realised there was going to be a bank there. We did talk with the builders at the time about digging it back, and that's why we actually ended up with the sleepers. They weren't going to put the sleepers in. They were going to just have it run down flat into the garden, but we would have hated that. So we're glad the sleepers are there, but the rest of the bank is kind of unusable space as far as actually doing anything on it. So at the very least, we wanted it to be something that was nice to look at. So we took a trip to Creative Gardens. I obviously know how it all looks, but my wife sort of walked around, and in Creative Gardens they lay all their plants out in themes rather than just kind of A to Z plants wise. And whenever we walked into the architectural section with all the grasses and stuff, my wife kind of fell in love with that look, and it's a look I really like as well. Not that that really matters. If my wife wanted it, that's what was happening. So we set about picking out enough plants and grasses and stuff that's going to fill in the bank and kind of make it nice to look at. And we absolutely love it. It was an awful thing to plant. It was one of the worst parts of this whole thing. But now that it is done, it has made such a huge difference to the garden. And it's so nice even being in the house and looking out and not just seeing weeds and muck. There's actually something nice to look at. I also mentioned that we get a little bit of wind up here, so seeing the grass is all blowing about in it, it just adds to the atmosphere of the garden. So there's no one thing that makes the garden what we want it. It's kind of the whole package. There's somewhere for me to cook, shoot these videos, have all my stuff to hand. I don't have to run down the stairs every time I want to get something out of the garage and bring it up. We have an area that in nice days we can sit out, we can eat, we can sit out into the night with the fire going and stay nice and warm. We have a bit of mood lighting now. Again, the garden had no lighting whatsoever. So now we have the nice festoon lights, the LED lighting in the shack. I have to say, my favourite time in the garden is whenever it starts to get dark. That kind of just after the sun goes down, it's getting dusky, you turn on all the lights. It's such a nice place to just sit down and relax. So the main aim of the whole project was to turn this into somewhere that we wanted to come out and use, and we have 100% achieved it. It's just somewhere that I enjoy being now. I enjoy sitting outside anyway, but now that we have somewhere nice to do it, it just makes such a huge difference. So I want to say thank you for being patient, and for those of you that follow the channel along, obviously I was gone for a long time and then came back, and then now I've been off for just over a month. But it was for good reason, is because it set us up well to move forward with the channel. And if you've watched the entire series through to this point, I again thank you. I know some of it isn't quite relevant to barbecue, but I do believe that the whole part of being into barbecue is about being outside, cooking outside and enjoying being outside. And whilst planting plants and doing paving and all the rest of it might not necessarily be part of that. Overall, I think I wanted to show that you can change an uninspiring space into something that you actually want to spend time in and inspires you to cook in it more. And as I said before, none of that could have been done if Creative Gardens didn't come on board and sponsor the series and want to put kind of all the aspects of what they do best. So their plants, their outdoor living, furniture, heaters, they do all the barbecues as well. All of that kind of comes together to make the perfect garden. Well, the perfect garden in my eyes. This has turned out exactly how I wanted it to, and that is because they have everything. They were able to deliver it all out to us at once, which was brilliant for getting it finished off, because they could hold off to the last minute until I really needed it. Just ask them to drop it out and everything was there. So I'll leave links in the description over to Creative Gardens website. They do deliver most things UK and Ireland wide, so if there is different bits of barbecues and stuff that you're after, check them out. They stock a wide range of Kamado Joe, Uni, Weber, plus a few other brands as well. I'll leave links as well for all the main pieces that we bought for the garden, so the likes of the stove and the furniture sets, etc. Just so you know exactly what ones we have. If you have any more specific questions about those sets or the stove, etc., leave them in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer them. But I just want to say thanks to Creative Gardens for bringing what was in my head and what I wanted it to look like to life. I couldn't be happier with it. So it's been a long month. We got everything done on time, which is the main thing. Might take a day or two to relax, but then we're going to crack on with more videos. Can't wait to get cooking in this. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video where we christen the new shack.